Hi, I'm Lynn Morgan, your slipper-shod pastor, with you today out on the back porch as birds are singing and the occasional neighborhood dog is barking. Today is the feast day of Saints Peter and Paul. And on days like this, when we think of people whose lives were incredibly consequential in world history and certainly in the life of our church, we are inclined sometimes to think of them as radically other than us. That's why we call them saints. But you know, Paul goes out of his way in his letters to call every Christian a saint. And I don't mean to take anything away from the distinctive quality of those who have been identified as saints, that they led lives that were so historically important, so obviously filled with the Spirit of Christ, so given over to the mission that they've received, that they stand out from the rest of us. I don't want to take anything away from those saints with a capital S. But I don't want us to look at them and imagine that therefore all we can do is admire their lives, maybe learn their life story, and look at it from a distance. But rather, I think the lives of the saints ought to remind us of a couple things. First, that everybody has a past. Both Peter and Paul, they were transformed by their encounter with Christ to become quite more faithful and effective and loving than they had been previously. And also that they didn't become plaster saints when they were called. They retained a lot of their foibles. I don't think that either of these people would have been folks who were easy to live with. And they didn't stop making mistakes. They didn't stop being human after Christ commissioned them to do the great work that they did. And also, I would have us remember that God continues to call people and use them. And yes, there's a cost to that. Both Peter and Paul gave their lives for the faith. And they did that not just at the end of their life, but they gave their life to Christ to be used the way that God wanted him to be used. And so as we think about saints and saint days, we are encouraged both to present ourselves to God with all of our failures and flaws, and be encouraged to know that God will take us and use us. But be prepared that when you offer yourself to God, God will take you and use you, and that will have consequences for your living and maybe even for your dying. But to be united with Christ, to be useful, to be one of God's own, that's our destiny. Not just the ones who get rendered in plaster, but all of God's saints.